Hello, everyone. Happy Women's History Month. Even though I do have Tupac on my shirt, we're in the second week of Women's History Month, and I love having my calendar right there so I can be accurate. I don't have to go on my computer calendar. It's all right there. And speaking of women, as always, obligatory self promotion. What if I ruled the world? Poems inspired by music written by me, a black woman. Even though I be calling myself your boy, I do identify as a woman. And it was just Black History Month. This month is Women's History Month, and next month will be Poetry Month. So, it'll be extra special. You'll be celebrating all those months with me. I mean, you can't celebrate Black History Month now because it's done, but you still have time if you have not got my book to get it for Women's History Month and then National Poetry Month, which is when I released a book a couple years ago. And I need to work on my newest book, and there are no meaningful updates on that. So I don't really have anything else to say about that. I need to work on it. That's what I need to do. All right, and we're going to talk about another book by a black woman, Beloved by Toni Morrison. Classic book. So I'm going to go talk about the genre, give you an autobiography a little bit. It's not going to be too much because she's done a lot. But the book is magical realism / historical fiction. As I said, Toni Morrison is the author. She was born, I can't read today. Chloe Anthony Walford Toni Morrison, on February 18th, 1931, and she passed away August 5th, 2019. She was an American novelist and editor. She was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1993. Her first novel, The Bluest Eye, was published in 1970, which I have on hold at my library for the audiobook, so I'm going to read that one next. Even though they do have they're sequels to Beloved, but they're not direct sequels. Like I said, like spiritually and kind of similar theme-wise. But yeah, there are 2 other books, so I'm also going to look for those to listen to those as well. Where was I? Okay, and then the critically acclaimed Song of Solomon, 1997, brought her national attention and won the National Book Critics Circle Award. In 1988, Morrison won the Pulitzer Prize for Beloved, which came out in 1987. It came out September 16th, 1987. So I'll just say that now. She was born and raised in Loren, Ohio. Morrison graduated from Howard University in 1953 with a BA in English. Morrison earned her master's degree in American Literature from Cornell University in 1955. In 1957, she returned to Howard University, was married and had 2 children before divorcing in 1960. Morrison became the first black female editor for fiction at Random House in New York City in the late 1960s. Wow. She developed her own reputation as an author in the 1970s and 80s. Her novel Beloved was made into a film in 1998. So I did contemplate reviewing both, but of course, it's not free. And I'm just going to wait until it becomes free, and then I'll talk about it. Because I'll be honest, I hate paying for subscriptions, and then you got to pay to watch stuff on the subscription that you already pay for. It's very annoying. So yeah. Even though I know to rent it is like $3.99 or $2.99, it's still the principle. That's what it is. And then where was I? So I went on a little rant and lost my place. Okay, that was turning the book. Okay, Morrison's works are praised for addressing the harsh consequences of racism in the United States and the Black American experience. National Endowment for Humanities selected Morrison for the Jefferson Lecture, the U.S. federal government's highest honor for achievement in the humanities, in 1996. She was honored with the National Book Foundation's Medal of Distinguished Contribution to American Letters the same year. Say that 6 times fast. President Obama presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom on May 29th, 2012. She received the Penn/Soul Bellow Award for Achievement in American Fiction in 2016. Morrison was inducted in the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2020. She's a lot of accolades. She's a lot that she did in her career, in her life. I'm going to read a synopsis of the book and then talk about the characters. So some of these, they're going to spoil it. So I was going to wait to like have a spoiler alert because I will spoil it because I'm going to analyze something in the book. But spoiler alert now, even though I know the book has been out since the 80s, but still. So it's set in the period after the American Civil War. The novel tells the story of a dysfunctional family of former enslaved people whose Cincinnati home is haunted by a malevolent spirit. The narrative of Beloved derives from the life of a Margaret Garner, a slave in the state of Kentucky, who escaped and fled to the free state of Ohio in 1856. So she does the same thing that Setha does in the book, and we're going to talk about that. So Setha is the main character. She escaped from slavery from a plantation called Sweet Home. She lives in a house named 124. It's actually 124 Bluestone Road, but it's only referred to as 124, which is believed to be haunted because I'm just gonna say it. So to escape from slavery, so she escaped from slavery, and then the enslavers came to come back and get her and the children. And instead of her, of course, she doesn't want to go back to slavery. So she planned on killing herself and her children, and she only got to kill one of the children. And she ended up going to jail, and then technically, I guess you're in jail, you're not really free, but she didn't go back to slavery. So that's what happened. Her two sons have fled because of the haunting, and so she lives with just her youngest daughter, Denver. She is motherly and would do anything to protect her children from suffering the same abuses she experienced when she was enslaved. So that's what she was trying to prevent. She is greatly influenced by her repression of trauma she endured. She lives with a tree on her back. There's scars from being whipped. Her family is, her character is resilient yet defined by her traumatic past. She was only 19 years old when she gave birth to Denver in 1836. Definitely not what that says. And then Beloved, the title character. The opaque understanding of Beloved is central to the novel. She's a young woman who mysteriously appears from a body of water near Setha's house and is discovered soaking wet on the doorstep by Setha, Paul D, and Denver. We'll get to Paul D in a minute. On their return from visiting the fair, I called it the carnival. The fair, it's the same thing. They take her in. She's widely believed to be the murdered baby who haunted 124. As the haunting ends when she arrives, and she behaves like a child. She also mentioned a young woman enslaved by a white man nearby had escaped, and Beloved recounts stories of past slaves, including Setha's mother. Morrison stated that the character Beloved is the daughter who Setha killed. Okay, so they confirmed that. She was not named, so her name comes from what was engraved on her tombstone, which is read simply Beloved, because Setha couldn't afford to write Dearly Beloved on the tombstone. She becomes a catalyst to bring repressed trauma of the family to the surface, but also creates madness in the house and slowly depletes Setha. So that happens. Paul D retains his name to Paul D. Retains his name from the enslaved men at Sweet Home who were named Paul. So there were three Pauls. It was Paul D, Paul F, and I think Paul A were all the names. And he has lots of painful memories from enslavement and being in a chain gang. He was originally continuously moving around before coming to 124. He has a tobacco tin for a heart, which he contains his painful memories in until Beloved opens it. And then Paul D and Setha, they do have a romantic relationship Next, father towards Denver, and he is suspicious of Beloved, of course. Despite their long past, he fails to understand Seta fully because of her motherhood and because the many years have passed since they last saw each other. All right. And then Denver is Seth's only child who remains at 124, and she's isolated from her community after Beloved's killing. Denver forms a close relationship with her mother. Upon Beloved's arrival, Denver watches as her sister's ghost begins to inhabit demonic activity. Although introduced as a childish character, Denver develops into a protective woman throughout the novel, which she does. And she fights not only for her independence, but her mother's well-being, breaking the cycle of isolation at 124. And she's 18 years old at the beginning of the novel, like I said. There are other characters, but I feel like I'm getting into a lot. But Denver is named after Amy Denver, a young white woman who finds Setha as she's running away and helps her deliver Denver. So that's what she's named after. And then Holly was her husband, and then Baby Suggs was her mother-in-law. And school teacher was a enslaver who took over when the original enslaver and his wife, well, the original person who was the enslaver, he died. And the wife got sick, so they had to bring their nephew school teacher, and he's really abusive and cruel. So those are all the characters. So let me go into my pros and my cons and my overall opinion. I love the plot slash story. I know plot and story are kind of different, but I do love the story of. It's honestly very sad, as you can imagine. Um, from dealing with the slavery and their traumatic past, and Setha wants to hold on to her children. She wants to hold on to her life. She wants to hold on to things that she still has left, and it's really sad to see that. And when I was reading like the Wikipedia about the plots and the major themes, it talks about how Baby Suggs, her mother-in-law, like all of her children were gone. Like she never seen any of her children ever again. Like when her son Hallie was able to buy her out of slavery, but he still remained a slave. And so she detaches, and then Setha does the opposite. She clings on. And when everything happens with Setha, and Setha goes to jail, and she's with Denver in jail, Baby Suggs like deteriorates, as you can imagine, as having so many traumatic things happen to you, and this very traumatic thing. And then she's still supportive of Setha in Denver, but it just takes it out of her, and I understand that. And then not seeing any of her children ever again is a big toll as well. But yeah, the story is really great, and seeing Denver, transform over the book, and seeing Setha, kind of transform negatively, but she ends up getting help, so it is nice. And speaking of the characters, I love the characters and their relationship to each other. Besides Beloved, who just comes and messes everything up and is evil. You know, at first she was alright. She was a little we were suspicious, but then she started going off. But the characters, I love their relationships with each other, even through all the traumatic events of slavery and all their connections, and still being able to be close despite everything that like all of these people have gone through. And like this was after Reconstruction and after the Civil War, and still making families and having families together that they could have, is really resilient. And I love Toni Morrison's writing. The details are so good. Even the magical realism, like you can still imagine it, and it's like, obviously it's magical realism, so it's a little otherworldly, but you're still able to be grounded in like, what's happening, and the connection with slavery, and it's just so much evil and so much turmoil, and mixed with the haunting. It's very good. It's so many great details. And then the narration. I love that Toni Morrison. I love when authors narrate their own books. I just love it because you get to hear, how they would say things and the emphasis and what they feel is important to like emphasize, and how they say things and how they talk for the different characters. And it's really great. I think she did a great job, and uh, I do. So, okay, let's get into my. Those are all my pros. We're gonna get into my cons, which is also the narration because she was a little low, but it could have been a user error thing. LOL. Because I did listen to it while I was driving, so I feel like if you're listening to it like at home and stuff, that's much better. Because like you're hearing the car, you're hearing, the person beside you driving, and she's a little low, which is, you know, makes it kind of creepy. It like makes it immersive, but then it's like you can't really hear some of the stuff. But I definitely will get the book and read the physical book at some point, like reread it. And then another con. I know this is not the point of the book, but I really wish that Setha and Paul D got to expand their relationship more. I understand why they didn't, because Paul D found out what Setha did, and of course, like many in the community, he disapproved, of what she did, and so they were kind of like at first they were on, and then he was just kind of like a father figure, and they were kind of like friendly, I guess you could say, and then they were like off, and then they were on. They found out what happened, and he was like, "Whoa," which I understand, but I also feel like it's a hard decision to make because you don't want to go back to take your kids back to some place is horrible. So what do you do? You know, because you ran, but now you're kind of at the end of the line. Like, the master has come back and the slave catchers have come back to come get you. So, like, what do you do? Right. Okay, and then I'm gonna talk about my favorite and my least favorite chapters. So technically there are only 3 chapters, so it's like the book is in 3 parts. My favorite chapter is chapter 1 with Setha and Paul D in Denver. I said the carnival, the fair, but they went to the carnival, the fair, and they had a great time. And it was like a very family oriented thing that they did together, like right before Beloved came and messed everything up pretty much. But Setha would look at their shadows on the ground and see that they're holding hands. And I feel like that was very nice because Denver was very protective at first, wasn't really warming up to Paul D because she was just her and her mom, and that's all they had. And so he comes there and he's taking time from her mom, so she didn't like that, you know, which makes sense. And then chapter 3, um, so this is when Beloved was possessing Setha and all that and draining her literally. And the reason why it was my least favorite chapter is because why did the townswoman finally come to help after all these years? It's been like 19 years. They knew all this haunting and stuff. They didn't come to help. And I know Denver went out to go ask for help, which good for her. But I don't like that these women never came to help before. So that's why that's my least favorite. I don't know. I love, of course, I'm gonna say I love the book, but that was my least favorite part. It pissed me off. All right, then let's go into my overall opinion. I finally read, so listen to this classic book. Toni Morrison is a great writer and had very detailed and vivid scenes she wrote for this book. I love the balance of the magical realism in the story with the actual horrors that happen to and by the characters. Setha had a very difficult choice when she was faced with being free and keeping herself and her children free. And I love the literal manifestation of her unthinkable act coming to life. Even though I want to go through the book and fight Beloved, it was a good like thing to like bring like your guilt and trauma to life. I thought it was very clever. I love Denver and Paul, these characters being there for Setha. I love that Denver, Denver, Denver grows up by the end of the book, and Setha's guilt, guilt and grief. If I could talk today, is expressed very clearly and it's very gut wrenching, and it really is. I'm so glad I got to read a Toni Morrison book finally, and will definitely be reading more of her books. And this book is definitely a 10 out of 10. I will say it is slow paced. So on the audiobook, like the first chapter is like, I think it's like 4 or 5 hours. So yeah, no, it is what it is. So it was a slow pace, but it was good for me. So I really recommend it. I do want to analyze Setha as a mother in the book. So I wrote an analysis of it. And I also was looking at the Wikipedia page about the major themes. There's so many, but I really wanted to focus in on Setha as a mother. And at first, I had this in three sections, like her as a mother to Denver, her as a mother to Beloved, and her as a mother to both of them. But then I was like, I'm just going to put it all together. So that's what this is. So I was looking at what the Wikipedia page said about the theme of mother-daughter relationships, and it mentioned Setha having a fantasy of a perfect family, although even after her sons ran away and she never sees her husband again because of slavery. So she still has this fantasy that everyone will be back together, especially when she realizes it's kind of going further down to what I wrote. But when she finally realizes who Beloved is, um, she really, has this thought like, oh my gosh, my family can finally be back together again, even though she doesn't know where her husband is, and even though the sons ran away because of the haunting. Which is just just the whole family structure that slavery just ripped apart. Treating people like property and ripping families apart, and so it's like the trauma just keeps continuing because she killed her child because she didn't want her child to go back to slavery. Then the child haunted her, and then the sons that she finally got like away from slavery, all of her kids, they ran away because she didn't want them to be back in slavery. And so then there's a child that passed away, didn't understand, so the child was haunting them. So it's like a vicious cycle. And even now, the trauma is like embedded into Black people's DNA, and it's just a cycle. It just keeps going around and around, and like nothing has changed because all of the things that were built on slavery is still here and is still impacting Black people today. So that's a little bit off script, but there we go. Where was I? Okay, that was a great, great observation because of how much slavery traumatized and took from Black people. Okay, I missed that. Okay, I kind of already said that part. Slavery, Setha clings to Denver because she's the only one of her children left at 124. Um, which I kind of already mentioned this. But Setha killed her other daughter to prevent her from being taken back to a life of slavery, so she clings on to Denver. Denver is in turn very reliant on her mother because they are isolated together because, nobody wants to be around them because of what Setha did. So they mentioned in the Wikipedia page that she fails to see her daughter's need for community, but she grew up after Baby Suggs died, not interacting with them. So Baby Suggs was kind of like still respected in the community, and so they would still go and see her. Um, so they would see Baby Suggs before Setha killed her child. And then they also talk about they had this big banquet and they had all this food, and so they were kind of jealous of Baby Suggs. And so then when Setha did what she did, and then combined with that feast they had before, and then when the slave catchers came to get Setha, and Setha killed her child, it just made the whole family isolated from the community. But Baby Suggs, people would still go see her though. But then, after she passed away, that was like, that was it. So that kind of pissed me off because, like, yes, she could have a need for the community, but they didn't want to interact with her before this. So, like, what was Setha supposed to do? Um. Okay, and then so Denver unfortunately was very lonely and only had her mother to keep her company, which she does mention. Like, she doesn't really have anybody but her mother, so she was upset when Paul D came. Her brother's leaving because of the haunting also had her wanting to cling on to her mother more. Okay, and I mentioned this because she hated when Paul D came and she had to share her. Um, when Beloved first comes, Denver is scared that her mother will hurt her. Um, because she has this like dream or nightmare where Setha is killing her because she finds out as a little girl what Setha did. Um, and she kind of blocks out Setha when she tries to explain it, so she doesn't really have like an explanation. Like like the trauma response when her mom was trying to explain it to her was just to block it out. And she's the first to realize that Beloved is her older sister. So Denver is initially excited because that meant she has someone to be around, and she doesn't let Beloved reveal herself to Setha to keep her safe because she thinks like Setha's gonna hurt her again. Setha feels happy to take care of both girls, and lets Denver take care of Beloved mostly in the beginning. But once Setha realizes that Beloved is her, passed away daughter, Beloved, um, from the when she killed her, so she wouldn't have to go back to slavery. Um, she wants to explain and make up for what she did. Um, so she used to just dote on Denver, but her guilt has her becoming upset with pleasing Beloved. So she like neglects her work. She spends all her money on her. She does all of these things to try to make up for what she did. Soon after she realizes, she begins to become. So as soon as she realizes who Beloved is, she becomes neglectful of Denver and her duties to her as a mother. So she starts neglecting her and only focusing on Beloved. So when Beloved first came, she was more childlike. They mention this in the Wikipedia too, but then over time, the roles reverse. So Beloved becomes more motherly, and then Setha, trying to please her, becomes more childlike. And this reminds me of when parents say they don't have a favorite child, but they clearly do. And I love that Denver steps up when she realizes like Beloved is being possessed, like Beloved is possessing and draining her mother. She reaches out to the community for help, and they finally come to help her with some compassion and help, uh, which annoyed me because they could have helped her the whole time, which I kind of already mentioned. So Denver grows up finally and becomes her own person in the end. And then in the end, Setha jumps back into her maternal instinct, um, because she thinks their landlord he's a white man. She thinks that he's there to kidnap, like to take Denver into slavery. So she like reactionarily like jumps up to attack him. Um, but then her maternal instinct comes back for Denver, and luckily like they don't let him. They don't let him. They don't. She doesn't get to him. Like, but Denver and the women like hold her back. Um, And I think Setha is a complicated mother because of slavery and her wanting to keep her family together when that terror tried to tear everything she had from her. And of course, typo. So this is one typo for every video. But yeah, that's my analysis as Setha as a mother. I think that she really wanted to make up for what she did. And her plan was to kill all of them. So she didn't really think that, she was going to get caught before she could finish the deed. Honestly, she probably didn't think that. But if you had to keep your child from the horrors of slavery, what would you do? And I feel like that's the ultimate question, and there's a lot of different themes, but it's like, what would you really do to keep your child from suffering? Like I said in my short video, and like I said in my other short video, Denver stepping up, and like the roles kind of reversing ish as well with Denver and Setha, because Denver steps up and gets a job and starts taking care of herself and being more independent. So yeah, that's my analysis of Setha as a mother. Have you read Beloved? Have you watched the movie? Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you like Toni Morrison, if you don't like Toni Morrison. And I will see you all next week.